Queen Liz welcomes you to the glass cage of Willow Creek, an in-depth, heart-wrenching video about extreme coercive control and survival. Before we dive into this powerful story of betrayal and redemption, please make sure to watch until the very end. If you find value in this story, hit the like button, leave a comment, and help us hype this video. It costs you nothing, but it truly helps push this message and support the growth of this channel. And now, the glass cage of Willow Creek. This video traces Elena's journey through systemic gaslighting, physical sabotage, and the eventual shattering of the cage through intervention and recovery. For 20 years, Elena lived inside a masterpiece of control. Julian, her husband, a meticulous, high-stakes architect, had slowly rebuilt her reality into something fragile and false. It looked beautiful from the outside. A sprawling home, a successful family, a life many envied. But inside, every detail had been engineered for one purpose: to make Elena doubt herself. Keys vanished, phone logs disappeared, conversations were rewritten. "You're slipping again, Al," Julian would murmur, offering a look of quiet concern that felt more like judgment. And then there was Sarah, her best friend, or so Elena had believed. Sarah moved freely through the house, uninvited and unquestioned, weaving herself into Elena's life while quietly dismantling it. Over coffee and empty reassurances, she fed Elena carefully crafted lies. "I tried calling Claire," Elena once said, her voice trembling. "The line was disconnected." Sarah didn't look up from her drink. "She changed her number, sweetie. She said she couldn't handle your episodes anymore." One by one, Elena's connections vanished. Her siblings, her father, even her sense of time and memory, gone. Only Leah, her youngest, remained at home. He watched from the stairs as his mother unraveled, his confusion slowly hardening into fear. Julian made sure of that. The manipulation was methodical. Each night, Elena drank from the water carafe Julian left by her bed. Each morning she woke disoriented, her heart racing, her thoughts scattered like broken glass. When she tried to explain, Julian would stroke her hair gently. "It's just your nerves, Al. You're deteriorating." Sarah reinforced it during the day, documenting episodes, forging messages, deleting calls. Together, they created a portrait of a woman falling apart, a woman no one would believe. The ultimate goal for Julian was financial control through power of attorney. For Sarah, it was complete displacement, viewing Elena as a placeholder for the life she intended to inherit. "You really thought he loved you?" Sarah mocked, stepping into Elena's personal space. "Look at this house. Look at your clothes. You're just a temporary occupant in my future life." Elena stared past Sarah at Julian, whose focus remained entirely on the legal documents. "Is that all I am to you? A bank account?" "Don't flatter yourself, Elena," Julian said coldly, leveling the paper directly in front of her face. "This was always about the trust fund. The affection was just necessary overhead. Now hand over the power of attorney, or Sarah takes your place permanently, and much sooner than planned." "You're psychopaths," Elena spat, tears blurring her vision as Julian tightened his grip on her arm. "We are pragmatists," Sarah corrected, reaching out to smooth down a strand of Elena's hair with terrifying tenderness. "I've already picked out which of your dresses I'm keeping. The rest go to charity. Her life is over, Elena. It's time to let me live it." "Sign it!" Julian roared, slamming his fist onto the table, shattering the glass top. "Your time is up!" The conspiracy involved three main roles. Julian, the mastermind, orchestrated abuse disguised as care. Elena, the mark, was targeted for her wealth and slowly convinced she was losing her mind. Sarah, the parasite, was the enforcer and social gatekeeper. "You're insane, Elena," Julian murmured, his voice returning to that terrifyingly soft, therapeutic tone. "The medication is making you paranoid. I'm doing this to protect you from yourself." "Stop lying!" Elena screamed, shaking against the table. "I know what you did." Sarah stepped between them, her phone already ringing in her hand. "I'm calling the private transport team now, Julian. She's completely unhinged. I've already blocked her brother's number from her phone anyway. No one can reach her." "Excellent," Julian said, checking his watch. "The notary is waiting downstairs. Let's finish this." Elena looked from Julian's cold, calculated stare to Sarah's eager, predatory grin. She was completely isolated, caught in a perfectly constructed trap where her sanity was the currency and her life was the price. "You won't get away with this," Elena whispered, her voice cracking as Sarah pressed the phone to her ear. "Oh, sweetie," Sarah whispered back, blocking the exit with a smirk. "We already have." Pillar 1 involved manufacturing madness through forged evidence. Sarah created a fake email from Elena's account and recorded her defensive shouting to document instability. Julian and Sarah then used this to threaten institutionalization to force compliance. "Listen to yourself," Sarah said, holding up her phone. A recording of Elena's voice filled the room, sounding frantic, screaming about shadows and poison. "Sounds like a psychotic break to me." "You provoked me," Elena cried out, backing away. "You cornered me in the kitchen." "The court won't care about the context, Elena," Julian interrupted, pulling up a laptop screen. "Look here. A sent email from your IP address to your bank, threatening self-harm if they don't lock your assets. You wrote it. Or rather, the digital footprint says you did." "I never touched that computer today." Elena's voice trembled as the walls closed in. "Who will the judge believe?" Sarah sneered, tapping the legal documents. "A respected husband and a worried family friend? Or a woman with a history of outbursts and unhinged emails? This tape goes to the state asylum in 20 minutes. "It's a one-way ticket," Julian whispered, his shadow looming over her. "Sign the power of attorney, and we keep you out of the psych ward. Refuse, and you spend the rest of your life in a padded cell." Pillar 2 was weaponizing care to induce physical decline. Elena suffered from severe insomnia and erratic behavior, unaware her water was drugged. Julian framed this decline as nerves, disguising the administration of poison as deep concern. "You look so tired, Elena," Julian said, his eyes swimming with a sickening manufactured warmth. He picked up the heavy crystal tumbler from the table and offered it to her. "Drink some water. Your hands are shaking again. It's just your nerves acting up, like last night." Elena stared at the glass, her heart hammering against her ribs. The memory of her racing thoughts, the agonizing night spent staring at the ceiling, and her sudden, violent mood swings rushed through her mind. It wasn't a breakdown. It was a chemical siege. "Get that away from me," Elena breathed, slapping the glass out of his hand. It shattered against the floor, water pooling across the hardwood. Sarah burst into a cool laugh from the doorway. "Oh, look at that. Another symptom of her escalating paranoia. Write that down, Julian. She's destroying things now." "Elena, please, you're hurting yourself," Julian sighed heavily, stepping over the broken glass with an expression of profound, weary disappointment. He reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small amber vial. "Your insomnia is making you erratic. You haven't slept in 3 days. Let me help you calm down." "You're the one making me sick," Elena rasped, her voice raw as she backed further into the corner, desperately trying to keep both of them in her line of sight. "Every glass of water, every meal, you've been draining my strength so I couldn't fight back." "We're keeping you alive," Sarah countered coldly, crossing her arms. "But if you don't sign that power of attorney, Julian might just stop adjusting the dosage, and we all know how fragile your heart has been lately." "I called my brother this morning," Elena gasped, her voice raw as she hugged her arms tightly against her chest. "He said he was coming. He wouldn't just ignore me." "He didn't ignore you, darling. He never received the call," Sarah said smoothly, pulling Elena's phone from her own blazer pocket. She tapped the screen with a manicured nail. "In fact, according to your phone, you sent him a text hours ago telling him to stay away. Then I deleted his responses. You're completely cut off." Elena's breath hitched. "You monsters." "We are caretakers, Elena," Julian corrected, stepping forward to block the light from the hallway, his shadow swallowing her completely. "The medical board, the bank, your family, they all have the paper trail. You are a sick woman who refuses help. If you sign the power of attorney now, we can manage your estate privately. If you force our hand, we call the paramedics to cart you away in restraints." "I will never give you my life," Elena hissed, her eyes darting to the heavy bronze lamp on the desk. "You don't have a choice," Sarah sneered, stepping up to flank Julian, entirely cutting off the path to the door. "Look at you. You can barely stand. Your heart is racing, you're hallucinating, and nobody is coming to save you." "Sign the papers, Elena," Julian commanded, his soft doctor's persona completely slipping away to reveal the cold predator underneath. He thrust the pen into her trembling hand. "Before we decide that a mourning husband is easier to manage than a sick wife." The phone bounced on the passenger seat, the officer's frantic warnings fading beneath the roar of the engine. Marcus gripped the steering wheel so hard, his hands went numb. He looked down at the tablet resting against the dashboard, where the footage from Mrs. Gable's camera played on a loop. It was undeniable. Julian sliding a white powder into the crystal pitcher. Sarah leaning in close to Julian, whispering plans while they thought the world was looking the other way. "They thought nobody was looking," Marcus growled, swerving around a slow-moving sedan. "They thought she was completely alone." Through the speaker, the officer's voice cut through the static. "Marcus, we are dispatching units from 2 blocks away. They will be there soon. Do not enter the property until they arrive." "They don't know the house, and they don't know how far Julian will go to finish this," Marcus shot back, his eyes fixed on the approaching intersection that led to Elena's street. "He's cornered her. If he realizes the police are coming, he might do something desperate to cover his tracks." "We have sirens blaring, Marcus. They'll hear us coming." "Then I'll be the one breaking down the door before they can react," Marcus said, his foot heavy on the gas as the familiar roofline of Elena's house finally came into view. Inside the house, the atmosphere was suffocatingly still. Elena reached for the glass of water, her movements sluggish, while Julian and Sarah watched from the shadows of the kitchen, their eyes tracking every inch of her progress toward the document spread across the table. The sudden, distant scream of tires and the roar of a truck engine shattered the silence, followed by the first faint wail of a siren. Julian's head snapped toward the window, his expression shifting from predatory confidence to sheer panic. Marcus was coming, and he wasn't coming alone. The threat escalated as Julian tampered with the family SUV's brakes to stage a fatal accident. He threatened Elena, demanding the power of attorney's signature. Sarah prepared a lethal syringe as a backup for an accidental overdose. Julian stood over the desk, his shadow looming large against the study walls. He thrust the legal documents toward Elena, his voice a low, jagged whisper that carried more weight than a shout. "The SUV is ready, Elena. One way or another, you are leaving this house. You can leave with your dignity and this paper signed, or you can leave as a headline in tomorrow's news. The choice is yours, but the clock is ticking." Elena looked from the papers to Julian, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "You won't get away with this. People know I'm here. They know what you're after." "People believe what they are told," Sarah interrupted, stepping out from the shadows of the hallway. She held the medical kit tightly, her expression clinical and detached. "And they will be told that the pressure finally became too much for you. A tragic accident, or a tragic lapse in judgment. Either way, the narrative is already written. All we need is that signature to make it official." The sound of gravel crunching in the driveway sent a jolt of electricity through the room. Julian's eyes flickered toward the window, his jaw tightening. "That's Marcus. He's early." He turned back to Elena, his desperation surfacing as he leaned in closer. "Sign it now, Elena. If you care about him at all, you'll pick up that pen. Don't make him a part of the accident I've planned for that car." "You're a monster," Elena whispered, her hand trembling as it hovered near the pen. "I am a man securing his future," Julian retorted. the tension in the room reaching a breaking point as the front door handle began to turn. And your time just ran out. The air in the kitchen was thick with panic as the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Elena stood backed against the stove, her chest heaving as she gripped the handle of a heavy cast-iron skillet with both hands. Her knuckles were white. "Get away from me!" she screamed, her voice echoing off the tile walls. Julian ignored her, tearing through the kitchen drawers, throwing silverware and dish towels onto the floor. "Where are the backup medical files, Elena? Where did you hide the unedited bank statements?" He slammed a cabinet door shut, his face twisted in a mask of pure rage. "You give me those papers, and you sign the power of attorney right now, or I swear to God you won't make it to that SUV. "I'm not signing anything," Elena shouted, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she maintained her stance. "It's over, Julian. People are coming." "They're too late," Sarah snapped from the doorway, blocking the only exit to the hallway. "Julian, forget the files. We don't have time. Just get her to the garage." Julian turned slowly to face Elena, his eyes cold. The facade of the caring husband was entirely gone. "You think that piece of metal is going to protect you forever?" He lunged forward across the linoleum. Elena swung the skillet with all her remaining strength, the metal whistling through the air. Julian ducked, the momentum of his movement carrying him toward her. He grabbed her wrists, pinning her against the counter as the heavy pan hit the floor with a deafening clang. "You are signing those papers," hissed Elena, his face inches from hers, as the sound of the front door being forced open echoed from downstairs. The standoff reached a breaking point as footsteps thundered up the stairs. Elena didn't back down, staring him in the eyes despite the terror. The kitchen, once a place of comfort, had become a cage, and the next few seconds would determine if she could hold out until help arrived. The kitchen door exploded inward. Marcus roared as he charged through the frame, his entire body weight slamming into Julian. The impact tore Julian away from Elena, sending both men crashing into the wooden table, splintering the legs and scattering the legal documents across the floor. "Get off her!" Marcus yelled, pinning Julian to the ground and striking him across the jaw. Sarah lunged from the shadows, her face a mask of desperation as she raised the syringe, aiming for Marcus's shoulder. "Let him go!" she shrieked. Before the needle could find its mark, Sister Claire intercepted her. With practiced precision, she seized Sarah's wrist and forced her arm down, causing the syringe to clatter harmlessly across the linoleum and slide under the refrigerator. Claire pinned Sarah against the counter, securing her movements. "The deception ends here, Sarah," she stated firmly. Julian struggled beneath Marcus, spitting blood as he tried to regain his footing. "You're all witnesses to an assault!" Julian gasped, his eyes darting toward the door where Father Arthur now stood. "Elena is having a breakdown! She needs that treatment! Marcus is interfering with medical necessity." "The only thing we are witnessing is the truth," Father Arthur countered, his voice steady and resonant. He entered the room, holding a tablet toward Julian. On the screen, the neighbor's security footage played in a loop. It clearly showed Julian tampering with the water pitcher on the porch and Sarah watching the perimeter. Julian's face went pale as the digital evidence rendered his protests silent. "The neighbor has already spoken to the authorities," Father Arthur continued, his gaze unwavering. "The footage, the hidden accounts, and the testimony are all accounted for. Your hold over this family is broken." Elena sank to the floor, her breathing ragged as the weight of the gaslighting finally lifted. Marcus kept Julian pinned, his eyes fixed on the man who had nearly destroyed them, waiting for the sirens that were already echoing in the distance. Heavy, authoritative footsteps echoed from the stairwell, accompanied by the sharp glare of flashing red and blue lights cutting through the kitchen windows. Detective Sergeant Elias Thorne stepped into the room, his badge catching the light, flanked by 2 uniformed officers with weapons drawn. "Police! Nobody move!" Thorne's voice boomed, instantly commanding the chaotic space. He scanned the fractured kitchen, his eyes locking onto Marcus pinning Julian, and Sister Claire holding a trembling Sarah. "Marcus, step away from him! Officers, take custody!" As the uniforms pulled Julian up and threw him against the counter to cuff him, the last remnants of the calculating mastermind shattered. The cold, smug arrogance Julian had worn for months vanished instantly. His knees buckled, and he slid down the cabinets into a pathetic heap on the floor. "It wasn't my idea," Julian sobbed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine as tears leaked down his bloody cheek. "Sarah made me do it. She wanted the money. Please, I was just trying to help Elena. You don't understand." "Shut up, Julian," Sarah snarled, her face twisted in venom as cuffs clicked around her wrists. "You pathetic coward." Thorne ignored their bickering, stepping over the shattered table legs and the scattered, useless power of attorney documents. He knelt beside Elena, his presence solid, calm, and grounded. He reached out, gently placing a warm hand on her shaking shoulder, offering the first real piece of reality she had been allowed to hold on to in weeks. "We've been tracking their offshore bank transfers and digital forgeries for 3 weeks, Elena," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a gentle, steady tone. He looked directly into her eyes, clearing away the fog of every lie she had been forced to believe. "It's over, Elena. You're safe now." Elena let out a ragged sob, the crushing weight of the gaslighting finally lifting from her chest as Marcus rushed over to wrap his arms around her. As the officers led Julian and Sarah out in handcuffs, the kitchen finally began to quiet down, though the air remained heavy with the adrenaline of the confrontation. Detective Sergeant Elias Thorne looked over the scene, his eyes moving from the broken table to the small gathering of people who had collectively dismantled a flawless crime. "We couldn't have made this stick without all of you," Thorne said, slipping his notebook into his coat pocket. "My team had the financial paper trail, but white-collar data doesn't stop a syringe or a rigged vehicle. You people provided the missing piece, immediate, undeniable proof of intent." Marcus, still holding a shivering Elena against his side, looked up at Father Arthur and Sister Claire. "If Mrs. Gable hadn't crossed the street to show me that footage, I would still be under the impression that Elena was resting at a clinic in Vermont. I would have never known." "God works through those who keep their eyes open, Marcus," Father Arthur said softly, gesturing out the window toward the house across the street. On the porch, Mrs. Gable stood under the porch light, her arms crossed tightly, watching the flashing emergency lights with an expression of quiet, unyielding justice. She saw what love blinded you to. She saw the malice. "And we made sure that malice couldn't crawl out of the corner," Sister Claire added, her voice sharp as she pointed a finger toward the space beneath the refrigerator, where the lethal syringe remained trapped. "A forensic team is going to want that. It has Sarah's fingerprints and a lethal dose of sedatives." Thorne nodded, gesturing to a forensics officer who was entering the room with an evidence bag. "We have the forged emails, the physical surveillance from the neighbor, and a house full of witnesses to an attempted assault. Julian's already singing down in the squad car. They are going away for a very long time." Elena looked up, her vision finally clear, looking at the family and the strangers who had fought through the web of lies to pull her back from the edge. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steadying as the nightmare officially ended. 1 year later, the modern, cold house Elena used to call the glass cage had been sold. She now sat on the floor of a sunlit apartment, surrounded by mismatched furniture she chose herself. The air smelled of garlic, chili, and basil from a carton of spicy Thai takeout, a simple meal Julian had strictly forbidden under the guise of managing her fragile stomach. Every bite was a quiet, delicious victory for her autonomy. The road to this apartment had been brutal. Months ago, Elena sat in a wood-paneled courtroom, her hands steady as she watched Julian and Sarah face judgment. The prosecution's case was ironclad, anchored by Detective Thorne's financial records and Mrs. Gable's footage. The defendants did not just attempt to steal an estate, the prosecutor had thundered, pointing at Julian, who was trembling in his orange jumpsuit. They attempted to systematically erase a human being. When the judge handed down the sentences, 25 years for Julian for attempted murder and conspiracy, and 20 years for Sarah as an active accomplice, Elena hadn't felt the explosive wave of relief she expected. Instead, a profound stillness settled over her. Julian had wept openly, begging the court for mercy, a pathetic display that completely shattered the illusion of the omnipotent mastermind he had tried to project. Now Elena chewed her food slowly, listening to the hum of the city outside. Recovery wasn't a sudden line crossed. It was a daily practice. Some nights, she still woke up in a sweat, reaching for a water glass and freezing with sudden suspicion. But then she would look around her bedroom, see her own books on the shelves, and remember that she held the keys. She picked up her phone and dialed Marcus. "Hey," she said, her voice grounded and entirely her own. "I'm eating the spicy noodles, and I'm doing just fine." 1 year later, the glass cage had been sold. Elena lived in a space filled with her own furniture and thoughts, reclaiming her autonomy down to simple preferences, like eating spicy Thai takeout forbidden by Julian. She sat on her new velvet sofa, the box of pad ki mao steaming in her lap. The rich aroma of chili and garlic filled the room, a sensory rebellion against Julian's suffocating restrictions. "Too much spice ruins the palate, Elena," his ghost whispered in her mind. "I like the burn," she said aloud, her voice steady in the quiet apartment. She took a deliberate, heavy bite. Tears sprang to her eyes from the heat, but she smiled. It was her pain to choose now, her pleasure. The lock on her front door clicked, and she didn't flinch. Marcus stepped inside, carrying a box of her old books. He caught the scent of the food and grinned. "Still burning your tongue out?" "Every single day," Elena replied, lifting her fork like a trophy. "And nobody is stopping me." The courtroom doors swung shut with a heavy, final thud, cutting off the distant, pathetic wails of Julian as the guards led him down to the holding cells. The trial had concluded, with the abusers permanently removed from society, their decades-long sentences safely locked away behind steel and concrete. Elena stood in the marble hallway, her hands resting in her pockets. For the first time in over a year, her fingers weren't trembling. Detective Sergeant Elias Thorne walked up beside her, holding 2 cardboard cups of coffee. He didn't hover, and he didn't push into her personal space. He simply extended a cup, offering support, not control. "They won't be seeing the sun from the outside of a fence for a very long time, Elena," Elias said quietly, his voice a steady, calming anchor. The state made sure of it. Elena took the cup, the warmth seeping into her palms. "It feels strange. For months they told me what to think, what to feel, where to go. Now, there's just silence." Elias smiled faintly, looking down the long hallway toward the exit doors where the afternoon sun was streaming through the glass. He turned to her, his expression affirming her absolute freedom. "That's not silence, Elena. That's a blank page. You're finally the one driving, and I'm just happy to be in the passenger seat." Elena looked at the exit, took a deep breath of the crisp air, and walked toward the light. The end. If you liked this video and would like more content like this, please like, comment, and hype this and other Queen Lizard videos. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is free for you, and Queen Lizard would be ever so grateful.